This is Sandy Shortt for the Hastings-on-Hudson Oral History Project. Today's date, July 19th, 1988. I'll be interviewing Dr. Bernard Reider. We're in Dr. Reider's home. Okay, here we go. Now, I'd love to hear about your mother. So start from the beginning, if you would.
Well, my recollections are that she was born in the town of Rzeszów, which at that time was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Rzeszów is a little village near Krakow, which today is Poland. My mother left there when she was about 16 years of age, and she was preceded to the United States by two of her older brothers. She left behind a mother and two other brothers. All of those that she left behind disappeared in the Holocaust in Europe, and nobody knows what happened to them. There's no record of any of them, and what happened to them we do not know. Just disappeared. My mother came to this country, as I say, when she was about 16.
What year would that have been?
Oh, in the 1890s. Exactly the year, I don't know. And 2 years later, she was married to Dad. She was about 18 at that time. They lived in Irvington, where they ran a little store. And subsequently moved to Hastings, where they bought a store which was started by my father's half-brother, by the same last name of Reider. They ran a mom-and-pop store there for some 49 years, working 7 days a week, raised 3 children, sent them all to college. All 3 graduated from Hastings High School and graduated in 1937. My older brother and I had a younger sister who passed away. Mother passed on about the age of 84, which would be about 4 years ago. To answer the specific question.
Back up. Where's your father from?
The Lower East Side of New York City.
Previous to that?
That's where he was born, that's where he was raised. He was born in New York.
I see. So do you know where his parents were from?
Well, his father probably came from Germany. His last name was R-A-D-E-R. My father's name was R-A-I-D-E-R. Somehow it got changed around. I presume the records were just not quite clear. Well, you were more interested in my mother than my dad.
Well, that's okay. I'd like to hear about Dad, too. They, after all,
Dad
were together
Dad
for
had
some
8
time.
years of education in the New York public schools and then went out to support himself. He actually traveled up and down the Hudson Valley here to sell shoelaces and other sundries and things to make whatever.
Dry goods.
Dry goods, whatever he could. He ran a little dry goods store in Irvington. And I say they subsequently moved down here to Hastings. Stayed there for close to 50 years.
Okay, I'm going to back up again. She came here from the area, I can't remember the exact town.
Rzeszów.
And came right to New York. And lived in the city for a while?
Yes, she did. She worked there.
Doing what?
As I said, her 2 older brothers were here before her.
Right.
She worked in the needle trade.
Some
4 years ago. She came here, of course, she didn't speak in English, but she became quite literate. She was interested in reading and played a lot of cards.
Did you ever hear any mention of her taking any classes, going to school at all?
No. But she read and wrote and was able to read and write. She was very self-educated, I would say. She spoke Polish, Yiddish, of course English. She had quite a lot of conversations with the local Polish people who came into the store.
Yes.
They was delighted in speaking with them.
Oh, absolutely. So she came here, lived with your 2 brothers for a time, but within a very short period of time met your father.
She was still a young girl.
18 years old?
18 when she got married.
And they moved right to Irvington.
Yes, they moved to Irvington, that's correct.
And what took them to Irvington? Do you know the
A
circumstances?
little store was available there.
And your father heard about it?
Yes, I presume.
And it was a dry goods store?
Yes, it was.
And he was there for how long?
My older brother was born in Irvington. I would say he was there for about 5 or 6 years. Sold the store to his sister and her husband, who ran it for a number of years after that.
When he had that store, were you alive when he had that store?
No, I was born in Hastings.
Okay.
He had the store in Hastings at that time.
Okay. Do you remember any of their conversations about, did Mom work in the store?
Oh, yes.
Yes. What did Mom do?
Oh, she just ran the store, sold things. raised the family at the same time. We lived at that time, when I was growing up, we lived above the store in the apartment building on Main Street. My mother would run up and down preparing meals and running the store as well. She just kept going up and down. We had a signal button that ran from the store to the apartment. If somebody came in the store, either mother or dad ran down to take care of them. You know.
Yeah.
So it was quite a full-time job there.
Absolutely.
You gotta remember, they opened at 8 in the morning and closed at 9 at night. Sundays they were probably there from maybe 7 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. There was a lot of traffic. There was no Sawmill Parkway in those days. And there was a lot of traffic on Broadway and over at Navy that went through the village going up to the mountains, Catskill Mountain. So they did quite a brisk business on Sunday night.
Where was their store actually located?
On Main Street.
1 Main Street, okay. Is that, I don't know
There's
the
a
numbers.
fashion shop there now.
Is that near, oh, that's right on the corner.
Right on the corner.
Oh, okay.
But they were in a building that's prior to the building that's there now. There was another store there prior, which was torn down when the apartment building was constructed.
I see.
And that apartment building was constructed in 2 steps. The 1 Main Street was left as the old building, and the new building was built around it. Then they took out the old building and they added that to the other building. It was quite a thing. For a while we moved up to Main Street above where Winnick's cleaning store is today, I think. We lived there while they were building this new building.
So, your mom and dad worked side by side
Okay.
in the store.
And the
And
children
you're-
helped them when they became old enough to help.
Yes, you worked in the store
Oh, yes.
yourself?
Oh, yes, very much.
And your mom ran the house.
Mhm.
Do you remember Dad helping to do things around the house?
Not too much.
Not too much. What did he do?
Probably took out the garbage, that's about all.
Uh-huh.
His mother's job.
Yeah. So Mom did the cleaning and the cooking
She-
and the laundry.
She had a cleaning lady come in at time.
Uh-huh,
Oh,
okay.
yes. Yeah, they were well able to afford that.
Uh-huh. Where did the cleaning woman come from, do you know?
Hastings?
Someone in Hastings. Do you remember who?
No, I don't.
They might have been.
They were the Slavic people that were so predominant in Hastings.
Uh-huh. So, how about the finances in the store, bookkeeping, things like that?
That was Dad's job.
That was Dad's. How about the bookkeeping and finances of the home?
Well, I think the home was run from the cash register in the store.
Yes.
Whenever Mother needed something to go out and shop with, she just took it from the cash register.
So it was her domain, whatever she saw fit she
Oh, sure.
needed, she would just
Yes.
take.
Yes.
Well, that was very nice.
Times were tough, but of course living was not too costly in those days.
Mhm.
And there was always enough money to manage.
To pinpoint a time frame, about when did you move to Hastings from Irvington, or did your parents move to Hastings from Irvington?
Well, I was born in Hastings actually in 1920.
Uh-huh.
I would presume they moved there probably right after World War II.
Okay.
World War I, excuse me.
After World War
World War I,
Mhm.
1918.
Okay. So they
In
lived
that
here
time frame.
during the war and through the
My
Depression?
older brother was 3.5 years older than I, and he was born when they lived in Irvington. So it would be in that period in there.
Do you remember, during those very hard times, your parents, I imagine that many people in town found it very difficult to buy things. Do you remember them giving credit?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Tell me about that.
Oh, they extended credit. There was no such thing as credit cards in those days. There was no MasterCard or American Express. It was just, they were well known in town, and they knew everybody in town. It was just a matter of honorable dealings between them. Surely. Credit was extended without any question.
Do you remember any problems with it, or
Very little.
anything
Very
interesting?
little. Very little problem. Very little.
Now, it must have been very nice for the Polish people in town to come and speak with your mom.
Yes.
Can you tell me something about that?
Well, I can remember, for example, there was a family named Sachar, S-A-C-H-A-R. Mr. Sachar used to come in and carry on long Polish conversations with my mother. We seemed to get along very well. We were from the same background.
Same geographic area?
Geographic background.
Oh,
that is
nice.
the Austro-Hungarian Empire,
Yes.
which became Poland.
Galicia?
That's Galicia, that's correct. That's correct.
That's very nice. Were there others, do you remember, stuck out in your mind who were
In Hastings,
friendly and would come in and chat with your mom?
that type of background.
Well, Well, yes, Polish. Let's stick with that for a minute.
Well, interestingly enough, the priest from the Polish church came by, very good, Father Dashkowitz, I think his name was, came by frequently and carried on long conversations with both my parents.
Your father also spoke Polish?
No, he didn't.
Okay.
Dad didn't speak Yiddish. Dad spoke some Yiddish because he was raised in a family where they spoke Yiddish.
Yes.
But being born in New York, he didn't have any.
But the priest would come in and have long conversations.
Yes, they would talk. He spoke about the old country frequently.
How did your parents feel, your mother, how did she feel about being here? Did she ever talk about that?
I think she was quite happy here. Mother and I took a trip back to her roots when I was 5 years old, which was 1925. We went back and spent a summer there, my brother being 3.5 years old, and I went to camp up at Broken Point. He was able to go to camp, and Mother couldn't leave me in camp. I was just too young, so she took me back to see her family. And I have some vague recollections of that.
Yes, what kind?
Well, I can remember taking bread on a Friday to a public oven, an oven that the whole village used, and putting the bread in to the oven. The dough was put in the oven and prepared that way. I guess they didn't have facilities for doing it at their home. And I can remember cousins of mine playing with them over there. I was the rich American who came back to see the family. We weren't really rich at all, but in their eyes we were rich. And a great deal more than they had. Now, some of these things that I'm thinking about, maybe things that I heard through the years, I don't know if I really recollect them or not.
I understand.
As a fine.
Do you remember any striking differences between home and there? You were very young, but do you
Between
remember?
the old country? Oh, sure. I remember they were just little dirt floors and very poor little homes, horses around. We were starting to get a lot of people in those days, but they had horses and wagons. It was very primitive. Much like you're reading the book Poland by Hitchner.
Yes.
Quite a reading Poland about that.
Who were your neighbors?
In Hastings, one. There was a family of Maddens.
Do you remember were the Maddens immigrants also?
No, they may have been Irish back there. They were living in the same building. Mother and Dad were very friendly with the Spiegels, House Spiegel, the Smallheisers.
Did they live relatively near?
Oh, well, they lived in Hastings, so couldn't be too far. They would get together frequently for social gatherings.
Tell me about that.
Well, they'd get together and the men would play poker, and the ladies would play gin or casino or whatever they were interested in, mahjong. And we frequently went away together for vacations up to the Catskill Mountains in any city.
Now this sounds a little later, perhaps more into the 50s or?
Hastings, 37 would have to be before that.
Uh-huh.
Probably be off to the Army. 33. It'd have to be in the 30s.
Oh,
Because when I came back
okay.
from the Army, I was already a dentist when ready to practice, so it would have to be when I was younger. It'd be in the 30s.
So they would go on vacations together, play cards, those kinds of things. How about on a day-to-day basis? Was there interaction with people that way? Or?
Yes, these gentlemen, or their wives would come into the store and they would sit down and talk even in the store when it was quiet there. Sure. Conversations when it's just nothing more to do. I mostly worked in the store when I was in local schools and high schools, so that would have been in the 30s, I'm sure of that.
Were you given money for the work you did in the store?
I had an allowance, but it wasn't for work I did.
So it was just something expected of you?
It was more or less expected, that's correct. That is correct.
Or what did you do?
Take care of the stock, wait on customers, fill in when Dad and Mother had to go out for a few minutes with them. I could run the store myself, and I did.
But you chose to be a dentist.
I didn't want the store to.
Tell me about your parents' feelings about you children and their aspirations for you.
Well, they were quite proud of us. My brother went to Cornell and graduated Cornell in 37. I graduated Hastings-on-Hudson the same day. And that was an interesting day also because since I was graduating high school, on the exact day my brother graduated Cornell, my father went up to Cornell, my mother went to the Hastings graduation. And that was in the middle of the hand. My sister passed away when she was 34. That was quite a tragedy in her time. But they managed, they survived and lived through the tragedy, which was a great delight to the rest of the family that they could survive this tragedy.
Do you remember as a child your parents saying things to you about, Bernie, when you grow up, I want you to be...
Bill was the name.
It was Bill.
Always known as Bill.
Oh, is that right? Why is that?
Well, that's a story that was given to me. I was born in Dr. Jenks' little clinic on Linda Avenue. And apparently there was a nurse there by the name of Billie, B-I-L-L-I-E. For some unknown reason, I became known as Little Billie. And I went through the Hastings High, but now I'm telling about myself, not my parents.
That's all right.
My name was Billie on all my records in the Hastings school. Nobody knew me as Bernard. They thought I was William, which I was not. And when I decided to go on to college, all of my records had to be changed in Albany from Billie to Bernard, which was my legal name. Billie was not a legal name, so that was quite a hassle too.
That's interesting.
What were you asking?
That brings up another point. I forgot that one, but the new point you brought up, that you were born in a clinic on Olinda, was it a physician's clinic or a midwife's?
Yes, Dr. Jenks was a local practitioner who ran a little hospital. It's a garage today. You don't know the building?
I think so, right
It's
across
across from the entrance to my
your office.
That's
That's
really a
right.
wooden building. It was
Oh.
a hospital. They had maybe 2 or 3 beds. Interestingly enough, there was an old family. I'm thinking now of an old family. The name of DeCara. Does that sound familiar to you?
No.
The DeCaras ran a barber shop on Main Street, and later on ran the Green Tavern.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary DeCara was born there the same week as I. We went through the Hastings schools together. Families were friendly. They were Italian background. But you see, it was a very small village, and all the families, they all seemed to get along quite well.
That's nice. I just want to pinpoint the hospital for those who don't know where it is. On Olinda and Farragut Parkway, across from the high school and across from, do you remember the address of your office?
Well, I used the Farragut address, even though the entrance was on Olinda.
Okay. So it's the southeast corner.
This little building?
Mm-hmm. Back from
No,
back
you know
one
where it is?
building.
It's on Olinda, on the south side of the street between Hockey and Farragut.
Yes.
Between
Good.
Hockey Avenue and Farragut, on the south side of the street. Dr. Jenks lived in the building till the night. He was quite a character in his time. They brought me along, in my office they brought a lot of rusted instruments that kept coming up from the floor. Apparently there was a basement at one time that got filled in, and they kept finding rusty surgical instruments, and they bring them over to me in the office. I don't know what they wanted me to do with them.
We probably thought you were interested.
I was.
Yeah.
That was a hospital.
Are any of those instruments left? That's interesting.
My mother, when she went into labor, actually walked up from Main Street to the hospital. She walked up in labor. It was July. It was a hot month. We probably spent the night there. I think.
Did she go up by herself, or your father with her? Yes. But you remember hearing the
I
story.
remember hearing the story. That's right.
I'm interested in Dr. Jenks.
Yes.
We're getting off here, but this is
Yes.
this is Hastings nonetheless.
Yes.
Do you know if Dr. Jenks himself was an immigrant, or had he lived in this country?
I do know he had a son who was a surgeon, and I think lived in Pittsburgh.
Now, you were delivered by a doctor. Do you happen to remember if, this probably is not a very fair question, but some of the other families, the Smallheisers, Calendars was another name that
That's
came up,
right.
Jacobsons, Finkelsteins.
Yes.
Were there midwives for any of these women?
I
Or
don't think so. Jefferson's in this area passed away, just recently Bernice Jefferson. There was a sister Carol, I remember. She was
Yes. How about practicing your religion early on?
okay.
Very early on.
That was very difficult. There is in the Jewish religion something called a minyan, where you need 10 men to conduct a service. That's the way religion is set up. And as a boy, we did have services in Hastings. We used to use the old library, which today is the Hook and Ladder on Main Street. We had services there. We had services in various churches at that time. And it was very difficult to get 10 Jewish men together. They just weren't available. I myself, I might also say that when it was time for me to study for the bar mitzvah service, I had to go to Yonkers to study. And we had a motor pool, or we went on the old trolley car back and forth to Yonkers. But to get back to the religious service, it was extremely difficult. We had services on high holy days. And there was an old Jewish sanatorium for mentally ill men up on the top of, back of the baseball field. Are you familiar with that?
Above
Near the
Zinsser?
children's? No, not there. The old field. There was a sanatorium, Dr. Weber, or something like that, ran a sanatorium up there for mentally ill Jewish
Baseball
men.
field. I like to pinpoint the location.
You know where the tennis courts are?
Up at Reynolds.
Yeah, and higher is the baseball field. And if you
Okay.
go up higher,
Oh, I see. Up by Hillside Pool,
way up,
maybe.
that's right, I think it was called Hillside in those days.
Oh, okay.
Way up on top, there was a sanatorium.
Uh-huh.
And they moved from there back out to Long Island because they couldn't expand up there and they had to get larger quarters. Anyway, some of those men would come down for the services. And when I became an adult in the eyes of the religion, I was able to partake in the minyan, so to speak, so that I could be one of the 10 men. And when we had our high holy day services, if one of the men left the room and there were not 10 left, the services couldn't go on, so I had to stay in the room until we finished.
Tough for a 13, 14-year-old
Very
boy.
tough, especially when it was World Series time.
Oh.
But we managed. That may be interesting to you. That we had to bring in. We brought in some man. We brought in a Torah, which we borrowed because we had the Torah, and we brought in a man to sing and chant the prayers.
A cantor. Where did you borrow the Torah?
Probably Yonkers.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most large one. And also, over the years, at times we would go away to the Catskills for the services also. Dad would leave the store, and he'd rush like crazy. He left there before sundown because you couldn't travel after sundown. Are you
Yes.
familiar with these things?
Yes.
You couldn't travel after sundown, so he'd lock up the store early, and the family would pile in the car and go up to the mountains. But we had to get there before dark. You know. Interesting.
Yes.
See how you remember things when you think about it.
Isn't that nice? Amazes you, huh? Well, you had to have the minyan, but also another part of religious life.
Kosher meat.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, that's interesting
Sure.
too, because there was
Yeah.
no kosher butcher in Hastings. And I remember my mother going to Yonkers to buy her kosher meat.
Mm.
Yes. There was a time when the butchers would deliver, but of course that went by the wayside also, and they would have to go down there and buy their kosher meat.
Mm-hmm.
Mother kept a kosher home, but they would think nothing of eating non-kosher foods outside the home. But in the home it was kosher.
So she
And it was
made,
not easy to keep kosher in those days.
she made quite a few adjustments coming here as an immigrant girl,
Yes, she did.
where she lived in a strict kosher home, I imagine, and then coming here.
But she modernized.
Yes.
She modernized very well.
Did she ever make comments about that?
Yeah.
Did it appear to you that it was a comfortable thing for her to
Oh,
do?
yes.
Or?
Oh, yes. Yes. As I say, they thought nothing of eating non-kosher foods outside. I mean, it didn't bother them at all. They were thoroughly modernized in that respect. Dad was very well educated. He only had 8 years of formal schooling, but he was very sharp, very well read, had an amazing wealth of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Mother read, as I said, and also learned to write English. I don't know how she learned to write English, but she wrote English. It certainly wasn't native with her. She didn't go to school in this country, formal school. presume she got some courses when she came.
How about special clothing that your mother, now this might be so far before you were born and wouldn't know this, but do you know, did she wear, I know there are special garments that some Jewish women wear, or wore especially then. Do you remember her wearing those? Mm-hmm. So she adjusted and did what she had to do. How about any social activities that might have occurred around a temple? Now, you didn't have one, but were there sort of religious?
Yes, I can tell you something else that may be interesting. Mother and Dad were active since they were old-time residents. They were active in starting the Greenberg Hebrew Center. They were charter members of the Greenberg Hebrew Center.
Which is up in Dobbs Ferry.
But I think that, if I recollect correctly, they started meetings at the VFW Hall in Hastings. I think we did have services there, and we had an organization meeting there. So they were charter members. In fact, my wife and I joined when they were 6 months in existence, because I came back from the army, got married, and we were members also, but they were already 6 months into existence.
Do you remember what the date that she was instrumental in this?
You know, I guess, you mean starting this thing?
Yes.
The Greenberg Hebrew Center? I came back in, it would have to be the summer of 46. In 46. And the Spiegel and the small hiders and the calendars and the Reiders were all grouped together and starting this thing. Today they probably have easily 350 families.
You think your mother might have taken some schooling initially?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, but I really don't recall.
Right. You and your brothers completed school here
One brother
in
and one
Hastings?
sister. The
Right.
three of us graduated from Hastings School. My brother graduated in 33. I graduated in 37.
Mm-hmm.
My sister was 6.5, 7 years younger. Probably graduated in 43.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Still working.
Yes, still working. Tell me what you remember about school. We're going away from your mother here, but tell me about your life in school. You can start with elementary, perhaps, and go up.
Well, I can tell you that very interestingly, when I came back from Europe with this 1925 trip that my mother and I took, I spoke a lot of Yiddish myself. I don't recall any of it today, but I can remember starting kindergarten and having a little trouble with the English language. Even though I was brought up in Hastings, I was in Europe probably with Mother for about 6 months and came back since I'd been with my cousins speaking a good deal of Yiddish. And of course that's not disappeared. I went through all this schools right up to the 12th grade, graduated the 12th grade and stayed on for a year in postgraduate at Hastings High. It took another year after I graduated because I was ready for college myself. So I spent 13 years in the Hastings School. There were no problems in school with literature.
No, I would just like to hear about it.
It was a very nice experience.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the language, because there were many, many children who had a language problem. Yes. And do you remember any other instances besides your own language?
Nothing specific.
Your parents spoke English at home, and especially since your father spoke some Yiddish but didn't
Yes.
speak Polish.
Not in the house. No.
Do you remember them speaking Yiddish sometimes?
Very rarely. No, they spoke English.
The focus of this whole project is the Hudson River. Could you tell me the memories you have of the Hudson River?
As a boy?
As a boy.
Oh, very vivid. We used to swim in the Hudson River. I'm talking about swim with a breaststroke to push the debris out of the way.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, literally. And I have a lot of recollections of the Anaconda and these things. The Anaconda mill, a copper mill. I used to deliver from my father's store to the supply there. We saw it for instance mill. To those wells. I can recall delivering for my dad up to Zinzer's home. Mrs. Zinzer very well. Colonel. There was a Ritz family, H-R-I-T-Z, that worked for the Zinzers. I remember them. But the Hudson River, yes, I can remember walking across the Hudson River, literally on the ice. One winter we walked across the Hudson River, another fellow before the name of Bill Flanagan, who also lived on Olympia Avenue. He and I walked across the Hudson. An icebreaker came behind us and broke a channel through the ice, and there we were stuck on the other side. He and I walked on the Jersey side down to Yonkers, took the ferry, came across the ferry, and promptly walked home to Hastings. Got home about 5 or 6 hours late, and my dad nearly beat the living daylights out of me. Here, he, instead of being happy to see me home, he beat me up for what I had done. And we used to canoe on the Hudson River.
Excuse me, how old were you when that? Do you remember
I
that?
probably was. I was probably about 14, 15, I would say. Sure. You see how it's still in my memory. Instead of welcoming home with open arms, I got beat up for it. Of course, I never did it again. I can remember automobiles on the Hudson River, on the ice. As I say, we went canoeing and rowing and swimming in the Hudson. We thought nothing would free us.
What kind of debris do you remember?
Oh, garbage of all sorts. All kinds of things. The tides would come in, the tides would go out. We knew all nothing about it. So we watched the tide and watched the Hudson day limers go by. It's quite simple. The kids still do it. What the Hudson's cleaner. We used to go up to Tarrytown to Kingsland Point.
I don't know.
It was called Kingsland Point. They had a public beach. We used to picnic there and swim in the Hudson River. But that was legal. Swimming off Hastings, I don't think was quite the thing that was approved, but we did it.
Was it cleaner up there?
Yes. Because it was.
So where do you think the garbage came from down here?
Just in and out of the tides. It just seemed to be that every village along the way was dumping their garbage in the Hudson River. We had a little park down there, and it's still there. There was a boat club, a yacht club there. A little further north, there was a little park we used to frequent. Hastings Youth.
You mentioned visiting the Zinzers at their home. That's very interesting. Where did they live?
Where the park is today. Edgar's Lane, corner of it, bounded by Edgar's and Broadway. Is the old house still up there? Do you know?
I don't know. I didn't know where they lived.
Oh, they backed onto the aqueduct. Does that sound familiar
Yes,
to you?
there's a house there.
There was a big wooden house. And we were delivering in there. It was dark and cool, and I can remember hearing a grandfather clock ticking away. This is what sticks in my mind as I came into this house. It was unusual for me to hear a grandfather clock. I can still hear the tick-tock of that clock.
What were you delivering?
Cheap foam and water. Lemons. Floating there. Much out to deliver.
And did you walk?
Sure. Sure.
A wagon or a cart?
Oh, I had a bicycle, but I think we walked most of the time.
Now, it was also very interesting to hear you say that your father provided, or your parents' store provided overalls and things for Anaconda.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, there was a very active mill, and this was before World War II, when there was no security. Anybody could just walk in and watch the men at work and talk to them. And Dad would get orders for overalls, special Sweetor overalls, which apparently the mill needed for the workers when I would deliver. I had to go through the mill to get to where they were receiving, because the receiving department seemed to be at the far end of the mill. the shortcut. We used to take down West Main Street. I remember this now. West Main Street, in the back had a steep path going down to the little power building there. And there was a path, just a dirt path, which was to take a shortcut to go down the hill.
Then along the railroad tracks?
Well, we actually went over the railroad tracks and walked on the other side. Not along the tracks, really. There was a road there. And nobody questioned you at the mill, at the entrance. So they say there was security was only going with World War II. It's a humming place in that day. Is this helping them?
Oh, it's wonderful. I don't want to miss anything. I'm trying hard to pick up on things that you bring up.
I might say that also during the war, while I was away, Mother and Dad bought a house on Whitman Street in Hastings.
What was the address?
I think 11 Whitman. I believe it's a two-family house which they bought with Jack Barron. Is that name familiar?
Yes.
Jack Barron ran the
Yes.
stationery store.
Yes.
All right. Well, Jack Barron and the Jack Barron family and my parents were friendly. I was away at service, and they bought this house. I think 11 Whitman Street. They each owned half the building, and they each lived. My parents lived downstairs, and my parents lived upstairs. When Dad passed away, Mother continued on in the house, presumed for another. She succeeded my dad by about 3 or 4 years, and lived on there. When she became feeble, we had a nurse staying with her, a housekeeper and a nurse, so we kept her around home until 1 month before she passed away. Then we moved her up to Tarrytown to the nursing home. She wasn't even in the nursing home 1 month, about 3 weeks when she passed away. We were able to keep her in her own home. And I would stop by from the office 2 or 3 times a week and just look in and see how things were going. I remember Mother was just as sweet as she could be. I would ask her what she wanted me to do about this or that. She said, well, whatever you want to do, Bill, it's perfectly right. You just go ahead and do it. So she had complete trust in what I did for her. That's the way it ended.
And really, she liked the name Bill.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, everybody called me.
She clung to that.
Oh, everybody called me.
Is that right?
Oh, sure.
Huh.
Only people who didn't know me called me Bernard.
Oh,
If they called me Bernard, I knew they didn't really know me.
that's right.
Yeah. Through my whole life, even today. Even today. There are people who see me and they say, hi, Bernie, they don't know me.
Yeah.
They really don't.
I'd like to think of some more things about Mom.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the social activities, when your family, your parents and their friends would get together, cards and things like that. Do you remember on a more day-to-day basis your mother coming in contact with the Spiegels, the Barons, the women from those other families, perhaps?
Well, I don't think the other women worked in the shops that the families owned as much as my mother did, so I think it was more likely that they would come to my parents' store and sit down and talk with them there, rather than my mother going out to their shops. They were mostly local business people, most of this group that you mentioned.
Right. How about your parents, your mother especially, disciplining the children?
I think that was more Dad's job.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure.
Tell me about it.
Well, if there was some reason for punishment, I think Dad meted out the punishment. It just seemed to run that way. My brother and I had a fight. We would both get punished by Dad, sometimes physically too. So we knew not to fight, at least not to let him know.
But Mom was not the one
No,
who
she
would
was
do
not
that
the
punishment.
disciplinarian.
Tell me about her personality. What kind of a person was she?
Very, very calm person. I would say very gentle, very loving. I really never saw her get excited or lose her temper. Never did see her. She was small of stature, probably 5 feet tall. Really a beautiful woman. Very loving, as I say.
And a very busy woman.
Seemed to thrive on I can remember when we lived on Main Street in the apartment. My folks went out one evening, and I was home with my younger sister. I don't know where my older brother was at that time. And I can remember that I was doing something for school in the living room and spilled a bottle of black India ink on the corner of the carpet, which of course would never come out. And I remember all my mother did was to rearrange the furniture, and that was the end of it. She rearranged the furniture to hide the spot, and that was it. That gives you an idea as to
Did
her
she
person.
talk to you about it?
Oh, she said it wasn't nice, but that was about all. There was no punishment. Yeah, I was doing work on a table in the living room, which was where we had to work, and the bottle of ink spilled on the carpet in one corner. All she did was just fix the furniture around to hide this and move the carpet a little bit, and that was all.
Well, how about your mother and father's relationship then? I mean, I can sort of guess, but tell me.
Well, they got along very well. There were never anything like that. There were the usual family discussions and the usual family disagreements, but nothing really great.
Do you remember hearing discussions where your mother and father would talk about really weighty issues within the family, within the business?
I never heard them discuss it. I can remember that a lot of Sundays that Dad would have, that I would go with Mother and Dad down to the marketing, the dry goods marketing areas where they picked up things for their store.
And where would that have been?
Down Broadway, there were a lot of shops where you go in and take a bin and walk through. And
Is this New York City?
New York City.
Okay.
That's the way things were done for the small stores. And they had these bins on wheels, and the salesperson would go with them, and they stock up for the store. Probably had a little Chevrolet or a little Ford. Interesting. I remember one time after we had shopped, we went to a restaurant, and Dad asked me to go out and check on the car because, you know, worried about security. And I walked out, and there were two men stealing the car. But they took the merchandise out of the car. They weren't interested in the merchandise. Put it on the sidewalk and drove off with the car. And I ran in and called my dad. I said, "Dad, they're taking the car." Sure enough, the car was gone. The merchandise was there on the sidewalk, and the car was gone. Yeah, never got the car back. Dad went out and bought another car.
Do you remember the year?
Oh Lord, that was probably 1928, 29, 30, something like that. Sure, I was a kid. He just took all the packages out, big packages, put them on a sidewalk. He took the car and he took off. By the time I got Dad out there, they were gone. Packages were still there.
So in doing this shopping, do you remember Mom making some of the decisions?
Sure, I'm sure. She was in on what they were buying for the store. Sure.
And you would all go together. So on Saturdays, which was your Sabbath, the store was closed?
No, it was open.
It was open?
Well, that was the biggest day of the week.
Okay.
That was the busiest day of the week. My mother and Dad were not, they weren't really that religious. They kept some of the traditions, but they weren't really that.
Yes, adapted.
Adapted, modernized it to their own tune. That store was that was Saturday, was the biggest day of the week.
Were they closed any day?
Just on big holidays, that's all. Major holidays, Christmas, New Year's, and Thanksgiving, 4th of July. 4th of July, they were probably open half a day because I was busy too.
Do you have any memories of the Depression other than things were a little tight?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Very good. I can remember people coming into the store asking for a few coins, and Dad never turned them away. Whether it was a nickel or a dime that he gave to them, people coming in selling things that he really needed. He never turned them away. He always gave us something. The nuns from the church would come in, and Dad would give them something. I can remember very well. But they managed. Parents managed. They worked hard and were frugal.
Yes.
Living costs were not high.
How about some other Depression memories?
That comes to mind. just how difficult things were. I remember that, yes, I can remember that. Yes, I remember people who did shopping that lost their jobs and either had to relocate or really were down on their luck. Banks were taking over their homes on Villard Avenue. The homes on Villard Avenue were $3,000-4,000 a piece, and the banks owned them. I can remember very lovely people who used to come to the store, and I know them from the store, and suddenly they were without any income at all, and no savings either.
No, I unfortunately was not alive during the Depression.
I remember people selling apples, selling sundries. Oh, sure. That was something that probably affected the bringing up of people my age. I was 9 years old, 1929, old enough to remember when things went on until the 30s. I was old enough to remember how difficult it was. We'll never see that. I don't think we will, because we have built-in safeguards today that will.
Well, let me just ask you a little bit. You made reference to the Spiegels, and I'm actually going to meet with Robert Spiegel on Monday.
I know very well.
Oh, good. I'm good. Good. I'm going to try and get in touch with Mrs. Finkelstein.
Can Jerry help you?
Jerry's away on vacation.
Jerry's younger than I am. How much Jerry would be?
Well, apparently his mother is very sharp, and I'm going to speak to
Dr.
her.
Finkelstein was my family dentist for years.
Then Barron's, you mentioned the Barron's. Do you remember what happened?
Yes, I do very well. After Mother passed away, my brother and I were the beneficiaries under her will. And we inherited half the house on Whitman Street, which we sold to Mrs. Barron and the 2 girls that were living at that time. And shortly thereafter, they sold the entire house. They now own the whole house, sold the entire house, and moved up to up in Somers. And the older daughter passed away, and the mother passed away, so there's just Betty Barron now. She's in Somers. It's Heritage, maybe it's Heritage Village. Somers, New York. Betty Barron.
She never married.
She never married. Neither of the girls married. My family was very, very close with the Barrons. Very close with them. They practically lived in each other's home. Rose Barron just passed away a little year after the predecessor.
What about the calendars?
There's probably just the girl, and there were 2 children. I think the boy passed away at a young age. They lived on Broadway, in the apartments on Broadway, just below the Hastings house. Mrs. Callender's still alive,
I don't know.
I don't know that for a fact. I think they would just be the daughter, Kate. Kate, I think was the girl's name. The boy, I'm sure is not. There must be some Smallhouser boys around. Ruth Smallhouser lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Why don't you try to get in touch with Billie Kaufman, who I think, William Kaufman. He's a CPA, and
Is this a relative of Morris and Samuel?
yes, that's his son. He's the only remaining child.
Oh, in Hartsdale.
I think in Hartsdale. Quite sure. That's Billie, who was a widow.
That's a good
He
idea.
actually was my best friend of all.
Okay.
I know he's there. Just too bad my older brother wasn't. He was in Florida because he would remember.
anything else before we finish up that you might?
The background of the movie. Stage you must remember that my mother was a very young woman. She and I went to Europe together for the summer. She really was quite a brave woman, an adventurous person, considering the background that she came from. That was 1925. Mother was probably 27, 28. She went back for the entire summer. It was hard to travel.
How did you get there? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. We went, one way we went on the old Mauritania ship, and another way on the Berengaria, the two ships from the past. It was the second Mauritania, I think, which followed the first one. It was a long journey.
And from the ocean, how did you then get in?
We must have been from France. I remember we were in Berlin. By train to get to this little town in what was then, at that time, was already Poland, because it was after World War I. Poland was rebirthed.
Nice memories.
Grandfather, my father's father, has made many trips back and forth from Europe to the United States. I don't know what his purpose was. He didn't have any money. A very interesting story they tell about my grandfather, which has nothing to do with immigrant women. He had no money. He was some sort of a coal delivery man. And they tell the story how he would wait till there was a group of immigrants going on board a ship, and he would get in with this group and go on board the ship and go up to the captain and say, "I'm bringing all these immigrants to your boat, but I don't have a ticket." And the captain said, "Well, just go on, just get on board. This is true. This is a fact." And he had no money at all. He went back and forth here. My father's father lived to be 96. And had two families. His first wife, who was not my grandmother, they had 4 children. She passed away. He married my grandmother, my father's mother. And they had 4 children. My father was born when my grandfather was 70 years old. But his wife was my grandmother was probably 35. And my father had a younger sister who was born when my grandfather was at least 71 or 72. And she was a twin. But the twin didn't survive the birth. She lived to be 82 or 83, never had children of her own. This particular animal, my father's family, her sister. Just too bad none of these people are still on, but they could tell you exactly what you need to know.
What a clever man your grandfather
Clever
was.
or cunning, I don't know what.
Cunning.
He would just get in with this group of immigrants, and he presented himself. He didn't stow away. He told the captain he's bringing all these people to it, and the captain was literally the captain of the ship. He ran the ship. What he said was the law. He just told me go on board and get back and forth that way.
So he was able to visit the family here many times.
Oh, sure.
Whereas most of the other families never saw each other again.
Oh, sure. He just went back and forth. He must have made 4 crossings.
Quite unusual for that time.
I remember my coming back on the ship from our trip to Europe and seeing the Statue of Liberty in the harbor. I was 5 years old. I was neither born, of course, was a citizen, but it was still quite a thrill to see that lady there. And I remember Ellis Island.
Oh yes, tell me.
I can remember. I remember it very well because we pulled up at night. I remember being awakened, and we were pulled up to this dock, and we proceeded into the harbor. Again, you don't know whether it's actually recollections or things that you hear over the years. Maybe actually.
Very nice.
Wish I could tell you more.
Well,
pull up Bill Calvin and see if you can reach him.
Sure. Look, we've talked nearly an hour.